Hello, Kindred, and welcome to the Retrograde Rumble, where I'll be knocking out retrograde ideas in the political sphere in as brief a time as possible. On today's installment, we'll be keeping on the topic of the black community somewhat by tackling quite possibly one of the most ignorant attacks on Black Lives Matter I've seen, courtesy of Turning Point USA. There are two issues with this video that I want to address before I get into it. The first is with the title of this video's use of the term plantation and the suggestion that the left has one. Such a casual allusion to slavery wouldn't be so offensive or reductive if it referred to anything remotely similar to it, like the prison industrial complex. Instead, it represents the monopoly that the Democratic Party has on the political leanings of black people, though it doesn't treat that monopoly as a conclusion that was arrived to organically and with merit. The second is less of a personal issue, but more of a content warning. The first minute of this video consists of painfully asinine and uninformed speech, which includes, at one point, a vaguely homophobic diatribe. The video also mentions abortion at a later point, too. If either of these things is particularly upsetting to you, consider yourself warned. Without further ado, let's get ready to rumble.
But I'm just saying, I've been researching Black Lives Matter, and I've been understanding the politics and how they're funded by white liberals. And recently, I've been feeling like they're white liberals in blackface. Because they're white liberals in blackface. When I say that, it's because the white liberals is all about feminism, LGBT. White liberals don't really care about black people.
That's correct.
I realize white liberals don't really care about me, bro.
That's correct.
I'm off the plantation, bro. I'm off the plantation, bro. I escaped the plantation, bro. I'm empowered. They don't want me to have power. They want to keep me dependent. But I'm realizing this. They put white liberal ideas, LGBT, women, non-binary, white feminism, all that Hillary Clinton stuff, put it in blackface. Because if we say it, it's going to be too crazy. So then Black Lives Matter, it started by three lesbian women. It's not really supporting black families. My question is, what do you think that has to say about the movement that they don't mention anything about black fathers on the website?
I'll tell you what it means.
Well, wasn't that a minute of your life you wish you could get back? You might not have caught it at the end, but Charlie asked him, "But you're cool with gay people, right?" Keep this in mind because I'm going to bring it up again toward the end of the video. Now, getting to what I would be almost too charitable in calling an argument, this idea that Black Lives Matter are the sock puppets of uncaring white liberals is so half-baked that it hasn't even risen in the pan. This isn't to say, however, that these liberals haven't given them any funding, though. Before we get to that, I'll quickly dispel the notion that white liberals don't care about black people. While there are a lot of white people, liberal or not, who don't really concern themselves with the issues that black people are uniquely challenged by, there are some who actually put their money where their mouth is. One of them happens to be George Soros. Yes, that George Soros. His group, Open Society Foundations, is one of several major foundations committed to changing the all-too-familiar statistics associated with the status of black males. Soros has invested millions of dollars in the foundation's Campaign for Black Male Achievement, an initiative that seeks to promote positive life outcomes for black men and boys. In that spirit, BMA Funders, a project of the Open Society Foundations and the Foundation Center, highlights the role of philanthropy in supporting black men and boys. BMA Funders strives to facilitate engagement, catalyze collaboration, and promote strategic decision-making in the field of black male achievement, serving as a resource not only to funders, but also to nonprofits, policymakers, and anyone else interested in fostering black male achievement. Several other organizations who are dedicated to helping Black people receive grants from the Black-led Movement Fund, which was started by Borealis Philanthropy. More specific areas of concern that these groups advocate for are the rights of Black people who are LGBTQ, gender nonconforming, immigrants, or undocumented, and the addressing of specific issues they face. In addition to supporting Black Lives Matter directly, they also fund the Movement for Black Lives, which has laid forth the policy platform that the group adheres to. One of the fund's major donors, a group known as the Ford Foundation, had this to say in support of the fund. That's why now is the time to stand by and amplify movements rooted in love, compassion, and dignity for all people. Now is the time to call for an end to state violence directed at communities of color. And now is the time to advocate for investment in public services, including but not limited to police reform, together with education, health, and employment in communities, and for people that have historically had less opportunity and access to all those things. The Ford Foundation's officers, curiously enough, are mostly white. That statement, on the other hand, is in keeping with the organization's storied history of supporting liberal causes, including the civil rights movement. This idea that organizations like the Ford Foundation simply pay off groups like Black Lives Matter to push a white liberal agenda is not only absurd, but it downplays the motivation of Black advocacy groups to better the lives of Black people to the point that it's insulting. And finally, to have supposedly done research on Black Lives Matter and come away with the conclusion that they aren't supporting Black families because they don't specifically mention Black fathers is to ignore or misunderstand what they have to say about family. I present to you the antidote to the speaker's ignorance in Black Lives Matter's own words. Black liberation movements in this country have created room, space, and leadership mostly for Black heterosexual cisgender men, leaving women, queer, and transgender people and others either out of the movement or in the background to move the work forward with little or no recognition. As a network, we have always recognized the need to center the leadership of women and queer and trans people. To maximize our movement muscle and to be intentional about not replicating harmful practices that excluded so many in past movements for liberation, we made a commitment to placing those at the margins closer to the center. Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, Maya Hall, Walter Scott, Sandra Bland. These names are inherently important. The space that Black Lives Matter held and continues to hold helped propel the conversation around the state-sanctioned violence they experienced. We particularly highlighted the egregious ways in which Black women, specifically Black trans women, are violated. Black Lives Matter was developed in support of all Black lives. Every day, we recommit to healing ourselves and each other, and to co-creating alongside comrades, allies, and family, a culture where each person feels seen, heard, and supported. We see ourselves as part of the global Black family, and we are aware of the different ways we are impacted or privileged as Black people who exist in different parts of the world. We make our spaces family-friendly and enable parents to fully participate with their children. We dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts so that they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. I know this is gonna sound like I'm quoting Captain Obvious here, but all fathers fit the description of parent. The reason they aren't mentioned explicitly is the same reason the group goes by Black Lives Matter and not All Lives Matter. The point is to center the discourse around the less privileged of the underprivileged so that they don't fall by the wayside when and if any real progress is made, thus making said progress more equitable. I think I'll leave it at that with this speaker. Let's see how Candace Owens raises the collective intellect of the room.
Nothing about black fathers.
First off, if I can just say, woo, another one off the plantation. They got a problem. And this is how it starts, right? So this is how it starts. So what he said in the beginning is really interesting, is he said, originally, I liked Black Lives Matter. Me too. Why would I be opposed to that? Black Lives Matter, right? Of course they matter. So you have to understand something about the left. They are incredibly good when it comes to linguistics. They use euphemisms, right? Planned Parenthood. Of course I want parenthood to be planned. Oh, by the way, we're actually killing 800 black babies every single day.
This is a point that I want to touch on real quick, because Candace really likes to trot it out when she talks about Black Lives Matter and how they don't really care about black lives. Not only is what she's saying partially untrue, it carries with it a flawed sense of perspective on what Planned Parenthood's real agenda is. First, we start with the claim itself. Planned Parenthood is killing 800 black babies every day. The number itself is a generous estimate, while the race of the aborted is speculative, as Planned Parenthood doesn't even account for race in their data. The number comes from the total 321,384 abortion procedures done in fiscal year 2016, which, if you do the math, averages roughly to 881 procedures done per day in a country of over 300 million people. That total shows a decrease from the 328,348 procedures performed in the previous year. To properly put that into perspective, more than twice that number of services were performed for the screening and prevention of cancer, including 336,614 breast exams. The number of cancer-related services is dwarfed by over 1 million pregnancy tests. The number of pregnancy tests is dwarfed by the 2.7 million services related to contraception, which is more than 8 times the number of abortions. That number is smaller than the number of services that were performed for the testing and treatment of sexually transmitted infections, which totals to 4.4 million and roughly 47% of all services performed that year. It could more reasonably be inferred from the data shown here that Planned Parenthood's agenda is less about terminating pregnancies and more about aiding people in the safe sex practices that prevent unwanted pregnancies, eliminating the need for abortion in the first place. Candace, like many pro-life people, showing this outrage toward Planned Parenthood over a relatively small part of their body of work reflects an almost irrational disdain for abortion in general. As depressing as it is to cease an unborn life, I think it's just as bad, if not worse, to place the potentially lethal burden of carrying that life to term on a woman who is unwilling and/or unable to do so. For women who are impoverished, it would be better for them and society if they had the lowest possible financial burden to bear while climbing out of poverty. That way, their future children would be able to be born into a higher standard of living than if they were born into poverty. Because we don't have a better alternative, safe and legal abortion is the best way to ensure this outcome.
You know? So this is what they do. They manipulate you by using a term that no person in their right mind would be against, right? Who would be against Planned Parenthood? Who would be against Black Lives Mattering? But the truth is, when you do a deep dive and you start to look at the finances, you're exactly right. People that are in control, Black Lives Matter is a political arm of the Democratic Party. Call them what they are.
The following statement from Black Lives Matter calls them quite the opposite. A resolution signaling the Democratic National Committee's endorsement that Black Lives Matter in no way implies an endorsement of the DNC by the Black Lives Matter network, nor was it done in consultation with us. We do not now, nor have we ever, endorsed or affiliated with the Democratic Party or with any party. The Democratic Party, like the Republican and all political parties, have historically attempted to control or contain black people's efforts to liberate ourselves. True change requires real struggle, and that struggle will be in the streets and led by the people, not by a political party. How about we just call them activists?
And their idea is to keep black people, as you just mentioned, enslaved and dependent via their emotion and their anger, right? So what I would say to you first off is to encourage you to keep going and to keep doing a deep dive, because that's how it started for me, right? It was one thing that didn't make sense. It was this constant narrative being shoved down my throat. But when I deep dived on these organizations and looked at who was funding them, it never really lined up to the things that would make the black community better.
I'm almost convinced that the deep dive she supposedly did was only 3 feet deep. It doesn't take much diving to learn about the Black-led Movement Fund, or the Ford Foundation, or the movements like Black Lives Matter that they support. None of that information, as far as I can tell, has gotten nearly as much attention as forcing it down one's throat would suggest it does. And that's a shame, because the issues these groups are working on are pivotal to the health of the black community. Take, for instance, this statement from Black Lives Matter on some of these issues. One is the issue of our failing system of public education, which is a virtual school-to-prison pipeline for many black youth. Another is the complete dismantling of the prison industrial complex. 3 other significant issues are problems with safe and affordable housing, issues with food security, and reproductive challenges affecting poor women of color and all people needing access to reproductive care. Does any of that sound like it's coming from people who want to keep black people enslaved?
You mentioned that that you realize that they don't promote straight black men, right? They never talk about the things that matter, black fathers in their home. That's because they don't want black fathers in the home. Make
Bingo.
no mistake. So congratulations to you. Keep digging, and can somebody at Turning Point USA get his stuff so we can hire him? All right.
In conclusion, what you've just witnessed, Kindred, is a part of the beginning stages of post-Southern strategy conservative outreach to the black community. Though this approach may not age well, it has potential to stick in the minds of people who already believe the argument that Democrats have always been the real racists. Nevertheless, it won't be nearly enough to woo even a plurality of the black vote, as it offers no policy incentive to stray from the party. It's doubtful that this message will go far beyond influencing black conservatives and affluent black people, 2 groups that will diminish as capitalism progresses and the appeal for left-leaning social and economic policies increases. The speaker's angle of attacking the LGBTQ element of Black Lives Matter, as evidenced by the response given to it, will be quietly ignored as many young conservatives have parted with the more outward homophobia of older generations. This will give way, as history has shown with conservative opinions of black people, to a more subversive form of bigotry, much like the anti-gay arguments for religious liberty. I can't say that I'm looking forward to the day that the speaker, elevated by Turning Point USA, says or does something blatantly homophobic in public, but the resulting backlash would be well-deserved for accepting him so willingly, even when he's just expressed a telltale sign of problematic behavior. Thanks for watching, Kindred. Have a nice day.